computer. All right, so this is on a recorded channel now, folks. And this is the very first session, as we call it, for the MLOps. Some of you, or most of you, been through the intro class where we wanted to go through some of the introduction of what we're going to cover. So we will not discuss that. We already have covered what we want to talk about in the sessions earlier to this. But in this session, what we wanted to start with is, and let me see if I can make this. You can still see my screen as a presentation, or it's showing something else. Okay. All right. So what we call this as a week 0, right? So this is not a week 1. In week 1 is where we want to actually talk about the machine learning and the artificial intelligence and whatnot, what we consider 6 weeks. But for next 6 to 8 weeks, let's put it this way, right? This is November 1st. So assuming we go by the calendar up until January 1st, you are stuck with me and Shri. Shri is not here today, but you are stuck with both of us. And we want to make sure that you are prepared well for the MLOps. But to prepare you for that MLOps, we need you to have a conceptual knowledge of some of the basic fundamentals. And based on the survey data, what you had filled out, based on some of the questioning we had done in the last few weeks with you, we believe that the core skills of AWS, the DevOps, and the CI/CD is certainly you. Not all of you have it. Some of you have gone through it. Some of you have some exposure to it. Some of you are learning about it. So what we wanted to do as a part of this week 0 is give you a very brief introduction or idea about what it is, what you need to do, and you will have a homework. And it's up to you whether you want to do that homework or not. But if you do that homework, that means you will have better chances of learning it. And since this is a fundamental, so it's like if you are in a school and if you don't know what alphabets are, A to Z, there is no way you can learn the sentence creation. And if you, or word creation, and if you don't know how to create words from those alphabets, then you cannot create sentences. And if you don't know how to create or how to use grammar, then you cannot create sentences in the right format, right? So this is all interconnected in a way where one will lead to the second will lead to the third, and so forth, right? So it's all foundational thing what we are gonna focus on, at least for this week. And to begin with, we will start with what I call cloud computing. And briefly, we talked about cloud computing when we were looking at in our initial intro part, but we will take a little bit further deep dive into what cloud computing is and how you can learn about cloud computing if you don't know anything about it, and we can take it from there. With that, this is the only slide I have on cloud computing. Okay, so we are not going to do a lot of sliding. We will only to focus on one slide and then take it from there. But here is a question for all of you. My very first question is what? And when we say cloud computing, I want to focus on AWS because, well, AWS is the market leader when it comes to cloud computing. So we want to focus on AWS than anything else for now. Anybody wants to unmute themselves and give me what is your version of cloud computing is? Okay, I'll take pause or silence as nobody wants to speak about it. So that's fine. So in a nutshell, cloud computing is evolved in the last, I would say, 10 odd years. And particularly, and we have somebody coming in, let me admit them. Okay, so Yeah, so where I was particularly talking about cloud computing. Cloud computing has evolved in last uh, 10 odd years. I mean, AWS has been in business for what, 15 odd years. 2006, 2007 is when AWS got started. But really it kicked off, I would say, in last 5 to 7 years, primarily where it allows anybody, and literally anybody, you, me, anybody can provision compute resource, storage resource, network resource, whatever we want from an infrastructure point of view, platform point of view, just with a click of a button, right? And when you say click of a button, simply you have a mouse and a browser or a laptop with an internet connection, and you can have an AWS account with your credit card. And if you have an AWS account, you can literally do anything. And when I say anything, think of Netflix. The entire Netflix is running out of AWS, right? So if you, or if Netflix can run their entire thing, whatever you see on Netflix, can be run out of AWS. I believe anything can be done on AWS from a technology point of view, right? So that is the beauty of it. With a click of a button, click of a mouse, you can provision hundreds of compute resources, thousands of or terabytes or petabytes of storage and whatnot. But I'm not going to define that what that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit from this slide. And you still see Chrome window, correct? Anybody? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And we are in week 0. So here is, I am on aws.amazon.com. Okay, it's very easy to navigate to, right? aws.amazon.com. And what I'm gonna do is just click on learn. And again, you don't need to do it when you want to go through or read through the material. That's where I think this will come in handy. But what I'm doing is I'm going click on learn and then clicking on what is cloud computing. And then I'm just going by AWS's definition of what cloud computing is and who is using cloud computing for that matter, right? In this scenario, they are saying it's a on-demand delivery of IT resources. And when we say on-demand, it's technically whenever you want. And it's not where if you need a lot of compute power, you just request it to AWS and AWS will give it to you. If you think from traditional non-cloud point of view, in an enterprise or in a company where you have worked or you will be working potentially where they are not using cloud computing, then it requires the servers. So servers is where typically you will launch all of your applications. And those servers are physical devices. It has to be racked, stacked, powered, and so many things has to happen. And typically it takes 6 months on a typical companies. And again, I spent so much time in the industry, so I know that in a good companies it takes 6 months. In a very political companies, it takes even a year to request a server, and once you receive that server, right? So if it takes almost like 6 months to a year for an IT to procure and deliver those servers for application team to start coding and deploying their applications, that means you are not realizing the technical benefit or technological benefit. So what AWS solves or cloud solves in that matter is give you an on-demand delivery of those compute resources with just click of a button. So instead of buying those hardware, what you are doing is you are literally sort of leasing it out, or yeah, it's like instead of owning a home, you are renting it. And whatever the maintenance to be done, whatever procurement has to be done, it's all been done by tenant. in that scenario, the tenant is AWS, and you are simply using it for the duration. Let's say you need to build an application and you need to deploy it. You build it for duration. So let's say you use that compute resources for 6 hours, then AWS will only bill you for those 6 hours, and that's it, right? Instead of that, in a company, when you procure a server, that server is yours. It's not like you are going to give it back to Dell or HP or any of the companies who are from which you have purchased it. Am I making sense? I'm pausing here. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So coming to the why part, right? Or we sort of talked about what, but coming to the why cloud, right? And then again, I'm going by what AWS is saying, right? So it's not you believe AWS and you won't believe me. So that's the reason I'm going by what AWS has to say. And then this has been their experience dealing with probably millions of customers who they are serving. So the very first benefit is agility. And when we say agility, it's kind of a speed, right? Because if it takes 6 months to procure a server, that means it will take for any application development team to build and deploy that application for maybe another 3 months, hypothetically speaking. Then your entire cycle is 9 months. And maybe typically in a business, that cycle is created year over year, where you budget something in January and then you get something in June and then you deploy something in August. By the time business has an idea in January, that idea may be very old by the time they deploy it in August, right? Because technology is moving very fast. Like if you want to deploy an app or if you want to do something from a technical point of view, that 9 months might be very slow. And that's the reason agility or the speed matters in business. And by using cloud, you get the resources what you need, storage, compute, network, whatever you name it, in minutes, not in months, not in days, but in minutes. And you start deploying in matter of days, right? So you go from idea to implementation. It's literally in maybe in a week. If you have an idea and you want to try it out, that idea, you think about it tonight, you start a server, launch a server, run with your idea, test it out. And in a week, you might be done with that idea saying that, hey, no, this is a bad idea. We should not do this. And literally, it's okay to fail, but fail fast, right? Instead of waiting for 9 months to fail, you want to fail in a week or 9 days. So that's one thing. That's agility, or the speed, as we call it. Elasticity. So all of you have been in US for a few years now, and most of you might be aware of something called Black Friday. Is it correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so when there is a Black Friday, that means probably all of the US consumer is going to buy something from online or from the website or somewhere, right? Whether it's Best Buy, Macy's, Amazon.com, or doesn't matter, right? And in COVID, at least for last 2 years, pre-COVID, that was a less, but during the COVID times, pretty much everyone was buying from online, from the websites. And on a Black Friday, there is a rush to buy things, whether it's online, in store, doesn't matter, right? That means there is a rush to the store, rush to the websites. It doesn't come free, right? When you have a website, you are running on one server, for example, and then there are 10 of us, let's say, in this room. But when there are 100 of users, that means one server is not enough, and you might need 2, 3, 5, 7, many more servers, right? So you need to scale up from one server to 5 server or 10 servers or whatnot. And that means if you are doing it in your own data centers, you need to procure those servers in advance and leave it off before Black Friday, but turn it on the Black Friday, or leave it on 24/7, and unnecessarily you have to pay for that, right? What cloud computing allows you to do is sort of provision it only when you need it. So you provision the day before the Black Friday, and you deprovision after Cyber Monday, right? Because typically that Black Friday will go till Cyber Monday from an e-commerce point of view. So for these 3 days, 4 days, or maybe even a week, you procure the amount of hardware what you need, and then you move on. And you only pay for that week, and you don't need to pay for that entire 52 week, right? So suddenly your cost is reduced when you are talking about running your business. So that's where the cost saving comes in picture, because you are only paying for what you are using, and you are not paying for the idle time, or you are not paying for something which is you shut down, right? Versus in your data center, typically you have, even if you're at your home, if you have a light on, that means you are paying your electricity bill to whoever is your electricity provider. But if you turn it off, your light, that means you are not paying that electricity bill anymore, right? The same goes in cloud, where you turn it on and turn it off. So far, any questions? So far, what I'm going through, the cost saving and the speed and whatnot, is it making sense?
No questions actually. Don't make sense.
Thank you. All right. So another benefit of cloud is, and most of these cloud companies, whether it's AWS, Google, or Microsoft, all has a global presence. And when we say global presence, it's literally like in 20 plus countries, they have their cloud deployment done, right? So that means if you are doing something, and if you are a global company, and if you need to run your application in US, in Europe, and in Asia Pac based on your user growth, right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel, or you don't need to have your own data centers in those regions anymore, right? Because these cloud companies have been creating those data centers and the regions, and then we'll go into the regions in a minute or so. But that means you can literally deploy globally in minutes. And how you can do it in minutes, when you have a user growth, or if you are deploying that application, and then we'll go through some of the automation when we go talk about DevOps. But let's say you need to deploy 20 servers for doing something, right? I'm just saying something. Let's say this Zoom. We are on this Zoom, and this Zoom requires, this is the client on which we are using, but technically Zoom is using certain set of servers behind the scene to stream our audio, stream our videos, the screen sharing and whatnot, right? And in that scenario, Zoom is using, let's say, one server. But let's say we are doing this global Zoom meeting where users are already dialing in from Asia, India, Europe, from London, Germany, or whatnot. In that scenario, Zoom will need to add more servers into London region, or somewhere in Germany, or India region, or some of the other Asia Pac region where there are Zoom customers are, right? That means Zoom need to have a data center presence, or they have to have their own data centers where they need to keep those servers. But that could become expensive. So what Zoom does is Zoom uses cloud, right? So most likely, whatever this meeting we are on right now is being ran on a public cloud like Amazon or Google or Oracle or whatsoever, right? But you can simply deploy that globally in matter of minutes. So that's what the benefit of cloud, when we say cloud or public cloud, is these are the benefit overall. Does that make sense? Or before I jump on to the next section of the cloud, it's all clear so far?
Yes.
Very well, thank you. So another thing, particularly you will hear a lot more when we talk about cloud computing, is this 3 types of cloud. And the infra as a service or infrastructure as a service or IaaS, platform as a service or PaaS, and a software as a service as a SaaS. So anybody wants to give an example of any of these three, what you may have heard of? What is Zoom? If we take Zoom as an example, what do you think Zoom is?
Software as a service.
Okay, that's a good answer. Then what would you consider PaaS, for example?
I'm sorry.
What do you think platform as a service is?
Something like Databricks.
Databricks. So elaborate a little bit more for other folks who doesn't know what Databricks is.
Okay, so Databricks is a Spark-based platform which can be run either on AWS or Azure for processing data, where we can ingest, transform, and further load data into warehouses as required. So it can be used for ETL or ELT purposes.
Okay, so practically when we say platform as a service, where in this scenario for you, in this case of Databricks, Databricks is providing Spark as a service, if I use that as a term, for example, right? And what Spark does, for those who don't know, Spark is primarily data crunching, and even they have certain machine learning component along with it. But practically speaking, it's giving you a platform where you simply bring your code, right? Your ETL code, your data, and then you use the underlying services what this company has to offer. In this case, Databricks is offering Spark or ETL as a service. It can be classified as a platform as a service, versus software as a service, where the software is already built for you. All you are doing is using that software. You are not bringing your code into the software as a service in a SaaS model, versus in PaaS model, you are bringing your code. Versus in the IaaS or infra as a service model, practically it's giving you a server or network and a storage, and you are building your own component on top of it. So it will give you a raw hardware, let's say, or virtual machine or a container, and then you bring your own operating system on top of it if you need one, like Windows or Linux or whatnot. And then you bring your own software, like middleware, your web server, your database servers, that you need to manage on your own, right? So that is the real differences between infra as a service versus platform as a service versus software as a service. Making sense?
Ritesh, can you
Yeah.
explain this part again?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah. So let's think of from a different angle. Which laptop are you using?
HP.
Okay, very good. So in your HP laptop, you have a keyboard, you have screen, and the underlying hardware, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. What operating system it is running on top of it? Hello?
Windows 11, I know.
Yeah, so my question is, what operating system it's running on?
Windows 10.
Windows 10. Okay, that's fine. Again, I don't need to know the version. I was just trying to find out the Windows or Linux or something else, right? So in this scenario, HP actually did a favor to you, where they gave you an operating system like Windows on top of it, right?
Mhm.
So when HP is giving you that operating system, without operating system, whatever you get, it's called infrastructure as a service.
Okay.
Okay, so you have a keyboard, you have a mouse, you have a hardware, you have a screen, you have a CPU, you have a memory, everything. And then you launch an operating system. Then on top of operating system, you launch your underlying, let's say, if you are a software developer, and for that you need, let's say you are a Java programmer. I'm just hypothetically saying here Java as an example, right? But to run your Java code, you need to have a Java runtime environment to be installed on top of the operating system, right? So think of infra as a service as your HP laptop with just bare bone operating system on top of it. And when you need to do a Java coding, before you even start coding, you need to have a runtime environment. It's called Java runtime environment, or JRE. You may be aware of it, or you also, if you are doing in C or C++ or something like that, then you will need some sort of a compilation environment or whatnot, right? So to do that stuff where you can actually run your code is where the component of that function is installed for you. It's called platform as a service. Or if I take another example is, let's say database, an Oracle database, for example, right? Where if you need to store the data in a database, that means you need to have a database server like Oracle. And when you have that Oracle database server installed for you, without you managing the database, without maintaining the database, and you simply bring in your Oracle data, you simply bring in your Oracle store procedure and things like those, it's considered as a platform as a service. Okay. And the last portion, software as a service, is think of that as your Word or Excel or PowerPoint, for example, right? Where you are not writing any Word code, right? You are not writing any Excel code, right? It's all meant for you right there in that client of your Word or Excel or whatnot, right? Or Zoom for that matter, is a software as a service, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the fundamentals of any of this? Okay. Very good. Thank you. So we talked about what? We talked about why. Anybody wants to chime in and talk about what is region and AZ thing? Anybody brave enough? Okay, Gyani, you unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, so region, for example, I work on Power BI and we have tenants like in US alone, we have East US, Central US, and West US, Europe, Asia. So basically, a cloud provider, host himself in all regions across the globe. So people who are in a certain country, be routed to the nearest server, nearest cloud server.
Very good, very good, very close. There are some nuances. Okay, I don't want to pick your nitpick your answers, but thank you. That is very close. Okay, so from an AWS point of view, and then again talking about the region and the availability zones, and the third item, which is what called edge location or point of presence. And I'll give you an example of each of this. But in this scenario, AWS has currently 27 launch region. So let's forget about launch part, but they have 27 regions. Now, when we say region, these are the dots, particularly where we are talking about regions. The red dots are something coming soon, so we don't need to worry about, but the green dots or the blue dot, depends on what on your screen is the launched or existing region. So if we look at from US point of view itself, right, in North America, what they have regions in, and I'm hoping you still can see or read. And if you cannot, that's fine as well. I'm reading through. They have Northern Virginia, so they have a region in Virginia which they call East or East 1. Then there is an Ohio. Then there is a California, Oregon. Then there is US East, US West, and Central. That's primarily in the government sector. And they have edge locations and whatnot, right? So that's in the North America we are talking about. Same way, if we go South America, there is a Sao Paulo, Brazil region. In Europe, there are like half a dozen different country, because European laws are very strict about data. You cannot have one country's data go into another country. Like Germany is very notorious, where they don't want any of their German citizen data going out of Germany. So all the cloud providers have different region. Like one is in Paris, one is in Frankfurt, which is in Germany, then one in London, and this is in Ireland, in Dublin, and Milan, Italy, right? So at least there are 5 different regions, and 2 more are coming. So Spain is coming up, I believe, and the another one is Switzerland. Switzerland is coming up. So is in UAE. There are a couple more in India. There is one in Mumbai. Hyderabad is coming up, and so forth, right? So there is a map. And the point what I'm trying to make here is each region has what we call multiple availability zone. And you don't need to understand what availability zone is from a technical point of view, but think of it as each availability zone is like one data center. And one data center has like thousands of servers. And in some cases, it could be millions of servers, okay? But that means from an AWS footprint point of view, probably they have like millions of servers running across the globe. And wherever you want, most likely you will find a region, even in Cape Town in South Africa. But yeah, wherever you see, you will find a region. And in each region typically will have at least 3 availability zones. That means they will have at least 3 data centers. And each data center is typically 50 miles away. So that means if there is an earthquake, and Northern California, some of you might be aware of, is sort of a notorious, particularly in the LA region, there might be a lot of earthquake. So if there is, and typically they design those availability zones in a way where if earthquake is happening, it would not impact the other availability zone or other data center, right? So that is how that entire design has been done. So overall, there are 87 availability zones and 410 point of presence. So let me ask a question. And again, it's a simple question, anybody can answer. So let's say you are traveling to India and you have a Netflix account, right? Assuming most of you have a Netflix or Amazon Prime or something. And when you launch Netflix in India and you are watching one of the US show, right? Pick your, whatever the favorite US show is, which is on Netflix. What happens? Anybody wants to guess what happens?
It opens up the Netflix India settings.
Okay.
I mean, it won't display the content of US
Okay.
region. It will just
Right.
display the content of Indian region.
Fair point. Okay. Now, what if I do want to watch that US show?
You need to access it through the VPN.
Okay, very good. Now, let's take a different example. So I think I took a bad example. let's say you still are somewhere in the US continent. Let me make it simple for you. And that Netflix is, again, we see the AWS regions are either in California or somewhere in the Virginia or East Coast, right? and you are almost at the border of Mexico. Let's put it this way. You are not in Mexico, but you are at the border of Mexico, somewhere in Texas, maybe Austin, Houston, whatever your favorite Texas city is, or San Antonio, right, which is close to the border. And we know that Netflix is running out of AWS, right? At least I said that in the beginning of the class. Now, if you are in San Antonio, Texas, and if your video is hosted in Virginia or Ohio or somewhere in California, it will take time for you to load that video from Virginia over to San Antonio, isn't it? Yes,
Yeah.
no?
Yes.
Okay. So what this point of presence is, and again, it's 410. It's spread across the world. Okay, it's 400 is not just for US, but 410 are the locations throughout the globe where AWS has what they call edge location, right? And what it does is it stores the cache, and there is a service called CloudFront, or some of you may have heard of something called Akamai. It's called Content Delivery Network, CDN. So what Netflix does is it uses this kind of point of presence locations throughout the world, and it caches most of the videos in those locations where people are watching. So let's take an example of, give me a name of a show which some of you may have watched recently on Netflix.
Money Heist.
Okay, very good. Very good. So Money Heist, right? And you've been watching Money Heist from your home location. Let's say your home location is in California and you are traveling to somewhere else, right? San Antonio. By default, your browser is pointed to the California region because you're watching from California all the time. So your local client knows that you are always in California and I'm going to serve you through California cache. But when you go to San Antonio and then when you try to launch it from San Antonio, you are still in the US region. So it will still show you the Money Heist, but it will serve you from that San Antonio location, edge location. Because it's caching across 400 locations, it will serve you from that San Antonio edge location. Now, some of you may have a question that how many shows it's caching locally, right? So there are certain cache algorithm. It's called list recently used or first in, first out or whatnot. So assume that somebody else was watching in San Antonio as well, the Money Heist. That means that cache exists. But if that cache does not exist in that edge location, it will go to the source. That source could be in California or source could be in Virginia. It will go to the source and fetch from that source and show it to you. So maybe the first launch of that Money Heist episode, for that first second or two, you will see a blip. But after that, you will see a very fast response. Okay, enough on the edge location, unless anybody has a question.
Is it something AWS is handling, or it's the extra logic that Netflix is doing?
So it's a combination of both, right? So AWS is giving you the facilities. AWS is giving you a service like CloudFront in this scenario. What Netflix is doing is Netflix is using that service in the right way, how AWS has prescribed, right? And consuming that and paying certain fee to AWS for using that service.
Okay.
All right, so that's on the region and AZ. Okay, here is the region and AZ. And again, they had a very good diagram, or rather overview. Looks like they took it out. It was a globe, spinning globe and whatnot. But again, that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm not gonna go into the detail. Next thing what we want to do is maybe I want to take a deep dive into some of these services. We are talking about AWS a lot, but it's only we are talking at a browser level. We are not going into their services. So what I want to do is I want you to go into some of this console and then get through it. So first question, anybody has an AWS account?
No.
Okay.
I have it. Hitesh.
Okay, Nishit. So here is, and then again, you want to remember this, okay? And then we are working towards getting you an AWS account where you will have access to it. And we will let you do some of those labs as well. It most likely it's not happening today, but that means I'm going to log into my own account and I'm going to walk you through what some of those things are from an AWS point of view. We'll look at a couple of services. I'll explain you what that service is, what it does, how it works, and then the fundamental aspect of it. But one thing I would like to mention is AWS is pay as you go. That means if you launch something and if that is running, that means you are paying for it. So when you sign up, and it's very easy to sign up. Here is AWS Management Console, and there are many ways, but here I'm going to log in a second. But you can sign up using just a credit card, as I was saying earlier. Or if you are an enterprise, you can get into the mechanics of monthly billing and whatnot. But once your credit card is on the file, and if you have launched something, AWS is going to charge you, right? And this pricing page is all you need to know about it. But it doesn't mean that everything is chargeable. There is something called free tier. And you can do a lot of things in free tier. So free tier typically have a 12-month free. But it doesn't mean that everything is 12-month free, okay? You can have EC2, which is the compute. We'll talk about compute in a second, of certain instance type, like T2 micro or T3 micro, and then you will have a question of what it is, and I'll explain you what it is in a second. Or you can have a certain storage, like 5 GB of a storage that comes under free tier. Or if you want to launch a database, then the database up to 1 year or 750 hours, sorry, not 1 year, but up to 750 hours with a 20 GB of a storage is free and whatnot, right? So there is, and then one good thing is for all of this, everything is public, where you will find everything in a public documentation or public places of what that cost is, right? Even if you, before we launch it, they will show us what that cost is going to look like, right? So just be careful. Even if we get into the free trials and the free tiers, we may get charged. And for this class, that's okay, right? Because we are bearing that expense on your behalf. But if you are using your own account, just be careful. You want to have some sort of a billing alerts, a budget for an everyday setup, so that in case something is running, you will suddenly get an alert that, okay, you have a daily budget of, let's say $5, and then that $5 got more, it's $10. AWS will send you an alert saying that, okay, your daily limit has been crossed and your last night's bill was $9 or $10 or whatever it was. Okay, so with that, let me see if I can get onto a console. Mm. Okay, so sign into a console. Okay, I'm very notorious about the security of this because if somebody get hold of this account, whatever that account is, doesn't matter. They can do anything they want. So I always have, okay, something is wrong. Hope my password is not wrong. Where is it? No, password is correct. So that means the MFA code is wrong. Let's try again. Okay, then something else is wrong. Give me a second. I'm gonna pull this browser on the side, make sure that I'm connected, and then I'll bring back the browser. You can still see the cloud computing slides? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. Mm, all right. So, okay, can you see something with AWS on it? Or
Yeah, we can see.
okay. All right. So right now we are looking at what we call the AWS console, right? Those who are aware of AWS and AWS services, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see it. But this is the landing page once I log in, and somehow I had to log in using a different account. But anyway, what we see here is the Ohio. What I'm gonna walk you through is this is where we select the regions. So we were talking about different regions, right? By default, AWS landed me into what we call the US East 2 or the Ohio region. We can choose any region we want, but ideally I would like to stay within the East region because I'm based out of East Coast. So that's first thing. Again, this is my root account. So again, I'm gonna keep that as is. This is the home and these are the services recently I have been using. But if we use this, there are, let me close, oh, here. In each domain, or maybe I do in each all services, and it's alphabetically sorted. So AWS has like more than 200 different services for different functionality, right? And we'll touch upon maybe two, maybe three at best, and still not enough because each service is like a mile wide and 10-mile deep, if I use that term. There is so much to do in each of the services, so we will touch upon very briefly. And you can spend an entire life and still you cannot master this. It's so many things to do with AWS. Okay, so that's the list of services. Here is some sort of a usage. I have whatever is going on for my last month or so into this account. There are certain shortcuts here on the right side where if you want to build a solution, you can launch a virtual machine, you can start a development project, and then so forth. And you will see some of the blogs. Trusted Advisor is a really cool item where it will show you certain checks, whether security issues or some billing issues or whatnot, and it's automatically run for you to give you that kind of alert, right? So when I land it, I see here, and if there are any open issues, here it will highlight that, okay, I have one issues and whatnot. Cool. So far with me? Okay, silence is golden. So what I want to start with is, okay, I'll let you pick. Is compute is more important to you or storage?
Both.
Both, okay. Then since you spoke up, Gyani, maybe you tell me which one should we pick to start? We are going to both, but to start.
I think storage.
Okay. So team, blame it on Gyani if you don't like storage, right? He picked that. Sorry, just kidding. All right, storage. There are like 1,000 types of storage. Anybody aware of a thing called USB drive? Right? Do we use that
Yes.
anymore?
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do. Okay, okay, okay. I haven't used USB sticks for maybe a couple years now. Why? Because I'm using this thing, a thing called S3. Okay, so let me talk to you about S3. S3, it's called, again, it's not scalable storage. It's called simple storage service. And that is how the S3 kind of came up. And I'll just go through this for a second. So Amazon S3 is probably the very first service they launched back in 2006, 2007, when AWS was created. And it's called simple storage service. And that is how they came up with the term S3. And S3 has become a very de facto standard. De facto and standard are the same thing. So it's become a de facto when it comes to object storage. And typically when we say object storage, there are many varieties of storage, but primarily there are, when we think of a storage, there are two types of storage. One is block storage, BLOCK, block storage, and the other is object storage. Block storage is typically where if you have, let's say, a database running, right? And you need a high performance, that's where you use a block storage. It's a little bit costly, right? So that HP laptop, what you have, Kavya, do you know what kind of hard drive it has? Is it a spindle? Is it an NVMe drive? Is it an SSD drive? Kavya, that was a question for you, so you have to unmute.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm checking on it.
Okay, okay, that's okay. If it is your recent laptop, maybe in last 3 years, most
It's-
likely, go ahead. Is it newer laptop or 5 years or older?
No, it's recent one.
Okay.
Just 3-4 months.
Very good. Then it definitely has what we call the SSD drive, or maybe even NVMe drive, okay, which is very fast from a storage point of view. So when you are writing something, right, when you are saving something, it store instantaneously. And there used to be something called hard drive or spindle drive, HDD, which spins at 7200 RPM, or maybe now there are higher RPM as well, but typically, let's say 6, 7, 10 years ago, when those HP laptops came out, I still have one. We don't use it anymore, but that has something called hard drive. It has a spindle storage. It's a slow storage, right? But it's cheap. So the point I was trying to make here is typically you will have two types of storage, EBS or the block storage, elastic block storage. But what we are looking at here is an S3, and it's called an object storage. And in S3, there is a concept called bucket. So what you see here is the icon for a bucket, where in that bucket, you dump anything and everything. You can store structured data, you can store unstructured data, you can store video files, you can store pictures, you can store your backup archive, log files, analytical data, doesn't matter. Whatever you have in the world, anything and everything can be stored in S3. And to be honest, all of that Netflix videos or even Prime videos or many other pictures, videos, what you see on the internet, 80% are coming out of S3. Maybe more, I'm just saying 80%, okay? Most of the website, they store their static content like video, pictures, HTML files, CSS files, everything goes into S3, right? So that's your storage. It's a cheap storage. When I say cheap, it's a 2.5 cent per gig per month. So it's like $25 a month for a terabyte, or $2. Sorry, my math can be very wrong. So pardon me there, but it's 2.5 cents, somewhere in that range for a gigabyte of data. The benefit is, and this is where it is, it's scaled to literally infinite, right? Where you can store petabytes and petabytes of data, all of your entire hundreds and thousands of servers data, you store it in S3. It's a general purpose storage, and it's literally not going to lose your data, because what AWS calls, it's 11.9 of data durability. So even if there is an earthquake and everything is gone, or if meteor strikes and everything is gone, your data will still remain intact up until billions of objects, right? So maybe you will lose maybe one file out of 10 billion if something wrong happens. So that is what they meant by durability and whatnot. So that's on a storage. So now the question is, how do I use this, right? This is an S3 bucket. I said S3 bucket. So let me do this. I'll go back to the console. I'll say S3. And one thing we need to do is, again, I have thousands of buckets, so ignore that what I have there. What I'm doing is I'm saying create bucket, and I'll say bucket name, right? Here is a unique thing. An S3 bucket name is globally unique. You cannot have a bucket name which somebody has already created. It's like your domain name. If you have a domain name created, ritesh.com, I don't have one. I wish I own one. Similarly, your S3 bucket name has to be unique. So if I say MLOps, sorry, and I create in US East 2, ACL disable, I don't want any public access, I don't want bucket enable for a version and whatnot. Again, we don't need to understand this in detail for our class. Just wanted to give you a background, but let's see, this will fail because I'm sure somebody has created a bucket called MLOps. Okay, bucket with same name already exists, right? So what I'll do is MLOps training. Okay, bucket already exists, MLOps class. Okay, that bucket name doesn't exist. And I'll create that bucket. And let me search for MLOps class. Okay, we got a bucket, which is MLOps class. We created it on November 1, 2104. That's I'm in the Eastern time zone. So it's showing me the Eastern time zone here, right? And I can upload my object here, whatever I want. Let me see if I can upload something which is not classified, if I have one. If not, I won't do anything such like that. Okay. I have a JPEG file. So I stored that or bring in the JPEG file. I just dragged and dropped and I'm uploading that file here. Okay, that file got uploaded and I can see it. So if I go here, it's showing me this object. So this is a file I just uploaded and it's showing me all the properties of that file, who has a permission, whether it's a public or not, it's not. And if we have enabled any version and whatnot, we can see all those versions and whatnot, right? And it's showing me the object URL. I won't be able to access it. Let me at least try, because this file is not public. So it won't work on a public, because right now I'm on internet when I click this link and it will say permission issue access denied, right? So by default, when you upload that file, it's private only, it's not public, right? So that is the security feature. You don't want data to be public. So far, cool with me? Storage? Any question on S3?
No.
All you need to remember is there is something called bucket, right, which we created. And within that bucket, you can drop multiple objects. You can create folders as well. It's like your folder structure, what you typically have in your Windows or Mac, where I'll say ML class. This folder is unique to this bucket, right? So it's not going to impact your bucket name. And I can move these things from here to there and whatnot, right? So I say move destination S3 ML ops / class / what was the folder name we created? Anybody remember? Come on. Nobody remembers anything? Okay. I don't remember either, so I'm going to browse, right? So the folder name was ML class. I'll say move into this and move, and successfully moved the object. Yes, green button. And I'm going to close this. So we are in this bucket MLOps class. Within that, we have a folder. Or you will hear this term called prefix, because AWS refer this folder name as a prefix. And we'll get to know prefix when we get into the data aspect of it. When we are crunching the data, that time you will see why we need the word prefix and not the folder. But within that folder, if we think from that point of view, we have a file, right? Cool. Good with S3?
So, Ritesh, I have a question. Like when we created this S3, right? It hasn't prompted any of the pricing details, right? Because when I had seen, actually, you just clicked on create, it immediately created, right?
Yes.
Is that the way actually, like, because in Azure, I remember like whenever we do, like we need to select the proper pricing tiers, I mean, subscription plan and others, right? So it automatically shows the pricing finally before creating anything. So mistakenly, we can create some of the S3 thinking that it's not going to be charged, right?
Good question. Yes, yes. No, you are 100% correct. Now, here is a catch, right? When you create a bucket, the bucket creation is free. You don't get charged for bucket creation. You can have thousands of buckets in your account and AWS will charge you $0. When you upload, even the folder, you can have thousands of folders, but when you upload an object, right? And maybe we should upload one more and maybe it will show. I don't know whether it will show or display the price or whatnot. But that's a very good question, whether AWS will show you the price when you are adding a file or a folder. I doubt. But when we go into the compute section, at that time, it will show us what is that compute is going to cost us. So yes, that's a hindsight in a way on AWS. If Azure is showing you, if you upload something in Azure blob storage, it may, I'm not an Azure expert, so I don't know about how they are showing up on their console. Let me see. Okay, so I added one more file. All it's talking about is permission. Okay, here is the availability zone. Okay, there we go. There are some fee mentioned as we are going into the deeper. Which storage class you want to choose, where you want to store, and whatnot. And does it show any price? No, it doesn't. Okay, yeah, that's bad, right?
Yeah.
But again,
So in Azure storage account, we have the equivalent thing in Azure, right? That is storage account. Whenever we create, finally it shows the pricing.
good point. So I think here it's in a fine print. S3 offers a range of storage class designed for different use cases. You can learn or you can see the S3 pricing. And that it takes us to the pricing page. And then it will say, okay, for first 50 terabyte, it's 2.3 cent per GB or whatnot, right? But yeah, it's not telling us that I'm uploading a 42 kilobyte of object, what it's gonna charge me to store it for 1 month, right? You're right. I mean, it could be a maybe a quarter of a penny or maybe a tenth of a penny or who knows, right? But yeah, they should show it. Yep, fair point.
Yeah, and mistakenly, if we upload a large file, right? The file size with gigabytes, it will be a huge amount, I think, right? If we keep it forever, unknowingly.
Yes and no. For a gigabyte, it's like 2 cents per month, right? So even if you upload a 10 gigabyte file, it's like 20 cents a month.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's not costly. It's in a relatively speaking, right? Yes, 20 cents could be a lot. Depends on how you are looking at it. But if you are spending X amount of dollar a month, and if you are getting benefit out of it, that 20 cents is nothing, right?
Yeah, and also I was thinking about the other areas of AWS also, right? Actually, if we are not prompting with the amount pricing for each of the services or these kind of things, it's getting activated, right? We might mistakenly enable something and it might end up
100%, 100%. Yeah, yeah, 100%. So there are So as the companies are adopting cloud, right, they are, what they do is there is a function called billing department, right? And all their job is to watch for AWS bills. And I'll show you again. I don't know whether I have an alert here. AWS budgets. What I do is I set a budget. That daily budget is $2. And I get an alert when I use more than $2. So today I use whatever, $5.63. So I should have got an email in my Gmail if I'm watching those Gmail account. Then I should have received an email saying that you use $5.63 even though your daily budget is $2 for this account, right?
Okay.
So yes, you can do that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my next question is like, you accessed everything in the website, right?
Mhm.
Do we have something in the mobile app format? Do we
I
have?
believe so. AWS Console is an app in App Store. Again, I don't know whether that app is how useful it is, because things like this you don't want to do it in an app. You want to only use app for some random emergency thing.
Yeah.
Again, that's just my point of view. If it was me, if I'm doing something on AWS, I would rather open up my laptop and do it, because it's very difficult to do things like this into an app. And I'll get to that point. Well, like if you want to work on S3, or if you want to work on EC2 or whatnot, you you don't want to do it on app.
Yeah, sure. I will. Yeah, but
Yeah.
just ask for for the knowledge.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there should be an app. Again, I don't know, to be honest, whether that app you can take a look at in your app store or the Play Store from Google, but there should be one.
Yeah, sure. I'll take a look. Thank you. That's it. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. No, fair. So any other storage question before we jump on to something else? So this is my S3. In ML class, we uploaded 2 files. Let me do this for fun. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this object public. Would it allow me to do that? Because I don't have properties. Okay, I wasn't planning to do that, so let me not do this. I'll come prepared on showing you how to make object public, and if you want to learn more about S3, I'll share via Slack of what all you can do with S3. So in the interest of time, let me move to something else. It's okay to move to something else, the compute part?
Yeah.
Very good. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move to something called, instead of S3, I'll go to something called EC2. Come on. Why I want to do, okay. EC2. So it's all acronyms at the end of the day. It's called Elastic, here it is, Elastic Compute Cloud. That's how they call it, E from Elastic and CC. So instead of EC square, it's EC2. Okay. What it is, it's a virtual machine. Who is not familiar with virtual machine? Okay, I'm gonna randomly ask.
I am.
Okay, good. I was gonna ask you, or at least ask about you. So virtual machine is sort of creating an abstraction. Let me say it differently. you have that HP laptop, right? And quite often your HP laptop is not 100% utilized. So similarly, when you have a server which is costlier than your laptop because it has so much CPU and so much memory, when you as a user are using that server, quite often you are using only 20%, maybe 40% at best throughout the year, let's say, right? So technically you are wasting the 60% of the capacity because your server, typically when you have websites, like when we just went to aws.amazon.com, it was always available, right? It wasn't where we had to create a server and then we had to launch it, right? AWS is keep it up and running all the time. Websites. That means they have servers running 24/7, right? Then only somebody can go into their website. Now, when those servers are running 24/7, and if they are not 100% utilized, that means they are wasting money, either the electricity or the server cost or whatnot. So what a smart person came up with an idea is called virtualization. And when we say virtualization is slicing your hardware into multiple components. So let's say you have in your server, let's say 4 CPU and 32 GB of a memory. I'm just hypothetically saying this, right? And if you are using 25% of the time, that means you are wasting 75% of that capacity. So you are only using 1 CPU and 8 GB of a memory. Again, hypothetically, right? So why not divide this server into 4 and let each component or each division used by 4 different people. So first 25% will be allocated to, let's say, Salman. The second 25 would be allocated to Nishit. The third 25% would be allocated to Kavya, and the fourth 25% was allocated to Gyani. Now, even when we allocated 25% each, Gyani is like, hey, I'm a lazy bird. I'm not going to use all of my 25% allocated. Can we split this with Chinmayi? And that means even further virtualization of that capacity, what Gyani has, that 1 CPU can be created in half CPU, and 8 GB memory would be allocated like 4 GB to Gyani and 4 GB to Chinmayi. Does that make sense, Kavya, from an overall concept point of view?
Yeah, I'm getting it.
So think like a cake, right? When you have a cake and if you cannot eat the entire cake, what are you gonna do? You're gonna share with others, right?
Yeah.
Same concept. But here there is a real money involved. In cake, it's only the cake involved, otherwise cake will get stale. So that is why that virtualization concept came in picture, and EC2, which is the mother of all virtualization, they literally, Amazon is making billions on EC2. Okay. You should read their 10K and AWS's revenue report if you are interested. But saying that, it's the virtual machine where you will have X amount of CPU and Y amount of a memory, and you pay by that capacity. Depends of number of CPU and number of memory. So how you pay? So there is a pricing. And we'll look at the on-demand pricing for now. And it goes in multiple, there are like 489 different type of instances. And when we say instances, it's like GPU instances, CPU instances, high performance instances, AMD, Intel, NVIDIA, you name it. anything and everything exists on AWS. But I'm going to use something called T3. And T3 is a general purpose family. And the reason it's because I've been working on AWS for the last decade or so. So I know about this, but T3 is a general purpose compute, and it has various instance types. So T3.nano, T3.micro, small, medium, large, X large, 2X large, and whatnot, right? And each comes with its own hourly price. So here is the CPU. And when we say CPU, it's a virtual CPU or vCPU. So it gives you the T3 Nano, give you 2 vCPU and a 0.5 GB of a memory. And it might be sufficient to run small workload, right? So we will launch this T3, one of the T3 server, and we will connect to it and we will see what it works and what doesn't. But practically you can run quite a lot of workload on this T3 Nano or T3 Micro or T3 Small, where your application does not require so much memory. Like 2 GB is enough for many of the web servers. Even 0.5 GB is enough for many of the web servers. Like if I'm running this website where I don't need to do a lot of computation, I would run on T3 Nano because it has a 2 CPU, there's a 0.5 gig of memory. That's sufficient for my web servers, right? But if I'm using database, for example, like an Oracle database, right, where I need a lot of storage and I do need a lot of memory. So even that 32 GB may not be enough. And as you see, as the size grows from nano to micro to small to medium to large, and as the memory grows from 0.5 to 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, this dollar value is growing. So this is an hourly rate. So if you use this T3 Nano for 1 hour, exactly 60 minutes, you will pay, what is this? Not even, it's a half cent, right? 0.0052, that is half cent, correct? If it is T3 Micro, you will pay 1 cent per hour and things like those. Okay, so let's do this. Let's launch something. EC2. I'm saying launch instance, and then there are many ways to launch it, but this is one way to launch it. And there are many things we can choose, but I'm going to select very few things. And then I'll just have to give a name. I'll say MLOps, and this is not a unique. This is unique to my, I mean, I can name anything. I'll say MLOps web server, for example, right? And this is EC2 is nothing but infrastructure as a service, right? So all EC2 gives you is a hardware. You need to get operating system installed. So here we have to select what operating system I want, right? You can have a Linux from Amazon Linux. We can have a Mac OS, Ubuntu, Windows, Red Hat, and then so forth. For now, I'll say, okay, Amazon Linux is fine for my work. So I'll say, okay, Amazon Linux. And Amazon Linux has a various version. It's like Linux 2. We'll look at the AMI in the next when we talk about DevOps. But what those images are and whatnot, I'll just say that fine. Here is what I'm selecting, the instance type. And I'm saying T2.micro, T3.micro, doesn't matter. T2, T3 are of the same family. It's like a sister. 1 vCPU and 1 gig of a memory. And here is the pricing. I think somebody was asking about the price. So you will see that price here. Who was asking on the price with Azure?
I was asking it.
Okay, Nishit. So we see that price here, right?
Yeah. And also I can see that free tier eligible.
Correct. So this is part of a free tier, but my account is more than a year old. So even if I launch this, it won't be counted as a free tier. It will be considered as a part of it, right? So they will charge me. So here is our T2 Nano. It's like a 0.5 GB of my memory. I'll go with this T2 micro for now, right? This is something if you are, we'll just launch it without key pair, but key pair is, I'll explain you what key pair is and what not in the next section. But primarily, if we need to connect to that server, like SSH into that box or RDP into that box, we need a security mechanism, because without key pair, you cannot securely connect to that server. So I'm not launching, or I'm not going to connect to that for now. So I'm just saying, okay, going without key pair. And there are some network setting. Again, we will go into the detail of network somewhere later. And I'm not connecting to this, so I'm not seeing any SSH traffic or whatnot. And by default, I'm choosing whatever the storage it has to offer. So here I'm saying, give me an 8 GB, right? This is the 8 GB of GP2 volume. So there are one storage type we looked at was S3. So this is another storage type. It's called EBS, or elastic block storage. And this is the high performance storage. So this is the storage where you can run database, right? Or this is the storage which is fast. Like here, they are saying this EBS is a general purpose SSD. So we are going this GP2, which is an SSD storage, similar to what you find typically in your laptops. And there are many other advanced details. You can use a Spot instances. We'll talk about Spot when we go into the details, and many other functionality of a Spot. User data, metadata, and there are some security aspect of Nitro. It's too advanced for now, so I'm not gonna go into detail. So in summary, on the right side, it's saying, okay, you are launching one instance. If we launch more than one, then I can just simply say, okay, I want to launch 5, and it will do a 5 of type T2 micro of the Amazon Linux operating system. And it's using 8 GB of our memory. It's creating a new security group. Let me change it to 1 because we only need 1, right? And I'll say launch instance. So it's launching, and it's saying it's initiated a launch successfully. And there are some launch logs that, okay, initialize successfully, security group created successfully, and launch initiation successful. Here it's showing you that if you want to create a billing alert for surprise bills, like I have a billing threshold, right? Daily budget and whatnot. The second option is connect to an instance. We said, okay, we don't want to connect. That's why I didn't even created a security group. But if we want to do that, we can do that. We did not create an RDS database. Otherwise, it would have allowed us to get to an RDS. But I'm going to go to this instance. So I'll click on that. I'm on that EC2 instance, and it's saying it's already running. So the instance state is showing green. That means it's already running. And here are some metadata of that instance, right? What is the instance ID? What is the public IP? What else I have, like the VPC? We'll talk about VPC in the next session on Thursday, but these are some of the metadata around it. And it's also monitoring on its own. So it's still doing an initialization because we just launched an instance. So it's not yet ready to do the monitoring. Maybe in a minute or so, it will say everything green. And here is the availability zone. Remember, we were talking about the availability zone. So that availability zone is 2B, and then it assigned some public IP addresses and whatnot, right? Any question on EC2?
So when we select the storage, whether it's creating an S3 internally, so you have selected 8 GB right here.
Correct. So what it did is when we selected, so when we are using compute, and when I say compute, EC2, for example, right? It's not So there are two types of storage, as I said earlier. S3 is your general purpose block storage. And that is outside of EC2. And you have a storage here, which is like an 8 gig. It's called EBS volume. That 8 gig volume is attached to that host. So that virtual machine, what we created, it has an 8 gigabyte of a storage local to that box. Make sense? Like your hard drive, your laptop hard drive, right? Which has what, 256 gig or 512 gig or terabyte, depends on what is your configuration, correct? So
Yeah.
that storage, 8 gig, what we selected is local to that virtual machine, local to that server, if I use that general term.
Okay.
Right? So that is not S3, right? S3 is outside of this.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. And probably you will have, when you will have access, I do want you to create this kind of things, get your hands dirty, connect to those servers, look at the storage, and go through that, right? But today, because we are running out of time, probably next week or in Thursday, what I'll do is I'll come prepared better, because somehow I could not get into my original account. I had to go through a different account, and where I don't have the SSH keys and whatnot prepared. So what I'll do is we will go through, connect to that server. We will see that 8 GB is associated with that server. And out of 8 GB, maybe operating system is using 200 or 300 megabyte. So you will have less than 8 gig space available for your application or your data to load, right? Making sense? Somewhat?
Yeah.
Okay, with that, any other question on EC2 or S3?
So if we just create the EC2, whether it's so at which stage actually it's going to deduct the money, like when we start the instance, or it is just once we create the instance itself, it will be billable.
So the moment the state becomes running, right? From that second onwards, it will start billing. And it is hourly rate of what we saw here, right? This is what EC2, sorry, T2 micro. T2 micro, T3 micro are the same. So it's like, it will be 1 cent per hour. And let's say we launch this, there should be a launch time somewhere. Come on, well, maybe it's in the, yeah, here we go. It launched at 21:32. It's 38 right now in my clock. So far we've been paying for 6 minutes for this instance. So 1 cent divided by times 6 divided by 60, right? Is what we will pay so far. But if we use it for the full hour, let's say I shut down this at 10:32, I'll pay 1 cent for running this instance. And it's a good CPU, good memory. T2 micro is a very useful instance. I do a lot of stuff on T2 micro. So if I'm paying hourly 1 cent, that means monthly I'm paying $7.30. It's 730 hours a month. If I'm able to use the T2 micro and generate a $7 revenue out of the T2 micro using $7.30, it's net, right? If I generate a revenue of $70 and I spent only $7, That means I'm generating $63 revenue out of this small instance. Make sense?
Yeah.
And again, if you are in an enterprise, if you are in a company, bank, financial institution, or healthcare company, or any company, if you are not using cloud like AWS or Azure, and if you are relying on the internal system, it takes forever to launch this kind of instances, okay? First, they have to procure the hardware, then they have to launch the virtualization, VMware or whatnot, and then they have to keep it ready all the time, and then they have to build a system to allow you to create this kind of VM, shut down this kind of VMs, and then whatnot, right? So it's a lot of time and energy spent. And it's not core to that business, right? Because that business is in the financial institution. They would rather hire more financial analyst, or they would hire more pharma researcher instead of hiring more IT people, right? Because IT is not their business. Their business is pharmaceutical or healthcare or financial from a core business point of view. So that's the reason most of these companies, whether it's banks or any healthcare companies or pharma companies or media companies, are migrating to cloud only because of that reason. Okay, I hope this session was somewhat helpful. Okay, that means it was not helpful. Okay, I failed. All right, I'm gonna. Sorry.
It was helpful, actually. We came to know about a lot of new topics in AWS and cloud computing. So it was definitely helpful, Ritesh.
Okay, that's good to hear. So one housekeeping note for me, let me do this now before I even stop the recording, is I launched this instance, but if I don't shut it down or I don't destroy it, AWS is gonna bill me, right? Even if it is 1 cent an hour, I'm gonna get billed for an hour. And then this is, I'm not doing anything on this instance, right? We just launch it for the fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to instance state, I'm gonna terminate it, right? And it's like a terminator. Once you terminate it, it's asking you, you sure want to terminate this? Everything will be gone. You will not be able to recover anything. Your data is gone forever in the ether. Okay, yes, sir, terminate. Okay, so it's saying shutting down. And the moment that state is changed to terminated, or whatever the next state is, and it's still shutting down. Okay, give a second. Oh, it did terminated. Okay, successfully terminated. That means we started at 32, we stopped at 42, for example, right? So it's 10 minutes. So I'm gonna pay 1 cent divided by 6, whatever is the value. Again, I'm very bad at math, so I'm not gonna do that math. But that's the money AWS is going to charge me for launching this instance today. All right, with that, let me